guys, it's Joey Morris for Witches of the Moon, and yeah, I'm your Tuesday's host, and this week's subject is: are covens necessary to the progression of one's path? And for this video I'm going to get out my goddess offering bowl again because I am absolutely in love with it right now. Isn't it great? Sorry, I'm slightly excited about it. I've been wanting one for many years. So before we start discussing whether or not I think it's necessary, I think we need to touch on what a coven actually is, because there are a lot of sort of questions that arise about what a coven is versus what perhaps a group is, and I think this is where some of the problems come in. So to the best of my understanding, a coven is a group of people, it can be men and women, that meet regularly, generally speaking in person, to honour the old ways. There is generally a high priest and a high priestess. Generally one or two of these will be in charge of the running of the coven. A high priestess is somebody who's basically almost like an ordained priest, if you wanted a cross-religious example, and they are someone who have been through many years of education and quite frequently have a certificate of that education to show that they have put the years behind their study. Frequently, to my understanding, it's quite Wiccan in orientation of the study methods, and I know that there are 3 degrees of initiation. So your first degree initiation, second degree initiation, and third degree initiation, and as far as I understand it, only once you have been through your 3rd degree initiation can you call yourself a high priestess. It's quite structured, obviously, as I'm touching upon, and the idea of covens is that people come together to learn about the craft, to study the craft, and to celebrate the craft within a group setting. The Wheel of the Year is frequently celebrated, the cycles of the moon are frequently celebrated, and that's as much as I can really tell you because I have never been officially part of a proper coven. I have come into, inverted commas, coven-like, or calling themselves covens, on multiple occasions in my life, and I've never had a positive experience with it. Undoubtedly some covens do have a wonderful experience and have a loving group dynamic that works for them, but me personally, I've only ever found negative group dynamics, and I actually have found those to be detrimental to people's paths rather than helpful or necessary. There is, of course, an ongoing sort of debate within the pagan world, which will always be around, which is whether or not it's less to be a solitary witch than it is to be part of a coven. And I think this comes from a sort of social pressure to fit in and be part of a group. When I very first came into contact with groups of people, it was actually in real life, and it was to do with when I first started openly practicing in 2004. That's quite some time ago now. 9 years, oh my god. So 9 years ago I first came into contact with people. Now I came into contact with a group that didn't call themselves a coven and had a positive experience with them, and celebrated one of my first outdoor group rituals, which was for Ostara. And that was a really positive experience. Although I've always been slightly edgy in large groups of people, so I'm not really suited to coven life, I don't think. And I'm going to discuss that in a second because I think that's important. But there was another group which called themselves a coven, and they basically had all these strict guidelines about whether or not you were allowed to even attend the open meetings. Like, you had to have come from so many generations, and generations of witches, and I was like, what? And it just put me off for many years. And then I've seen other group dynamics where there's just been people bossing people around, people putting people down, people being detrimental to newbies who don't necessarily know as much, or etc. So I have never had a positive coven experience, and part of me thinks that I never ever will, because I think I personally am more suited to solitary witchcraft. Now, I enjoy certain groups of people. I enjoy discussing things. I enjoy YouTube, which is in itself a community where you share ideas. But the good thing about that is you can do that at your own pace. You've not got anybody telling you have to do it this, that way and the other. You don't have to be there every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. I'm not very good for strict disciplinary guidelines. You have to be here at this time, you have to do this, you have to bring that. I get riled up the wrong way by it. I'm quite solitary, I'm quite independent. I like doing things the way I like doing them. It would bug me if I didn't like the way something was worded in a ritual, it would bug me, and as a result I'm going to be solitary my whole life, because I don't want to offend anybody within a group who's tried really hard for whatever and they've done anything really hard, and then just because I don't like the way they did it, you know, that could offend somebody, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to upset anybody, and so therefore for the most part I stay solitary and I plan my own rituals. I'm perfectly capable of doing that. If I need to miss a ritual for health reasons or whatever, I can do it the following day, and that to me is all right, because or if I don't do it and I just say a little prayer or go out in nature for a little bit, and that's all right with me. But within group dynamics, sometimes you would get people coming down hard on you because you had let them down, and that's not something you need in a spiritual path, I don't think. Pressure in a spiritual path to me just kind of ruins the magic, as far as I'm concerned. These things are supposed to be celebratory, you're supposed to be enjoying them, and group dynamics have never affected me in a really positive way, not in large groups of people ever. And there's always problems. There's always someone that you're not going to get on with. There's always someone who brings negativity into your world in some way or other, and it's just the really unfortunate side effect of any group I have ever seen in my lifetime. Now, I'm not going to say there aren't covens out there that manage brilliantly. They, are like a close-knit community of family almost. I'm sure there are. I don't know how they manage it. Excuse me. But I'm sure they are. But are they necessary? I would say it highly depends on the individual. For me, absolutely not. I have never felt at a loss for being a solitary practitioner. In fact, I feel the strengths of being a solitary practitioner. Some of those strengths are that I am independent, I can trust my own intuition without ever going and seeking approval from anybody else. I carve my own path, which I think witchcraft is about anyway. It's not following what anybody says, it's not following doctrine, it's making your own moral and ethical decisions. It's about embracing the way you interact with your path and the world around you. It's about learning to celebrate what you feel is important by yourself. You even get more creative outlet because you can write your own rituals, you can create your own stuff. There's no one telling you this recipe is the best way to do it, because if you do that and you don't feel it, you can change it, and that's true with everything in the recipe of life. You can mix it up, you can change it up, you can feel out what's right for you, and you learn to trust your own instincts and your own intuition and your own spiritual facilities over that of someone else. You're not looking for approval from anybody apart from the divine, perhaps, and they are frequently mysterious enough to be like, well, what do you think? Especially if you follow the Morrigan, or anybody like the Morrigan, and it's like, well, what do you think? But I wanted to know what you thought. Well, I'm not going to tell you. You have to figure that out for yourself. I mean, you get strong feelings here and there when they don't like something, but generally speaking, it's a very self-exploratory path, and I prefer that. Now, some people might benefit from a coven experience if they're very, very new, very, very frightened, although I would argue against getting into witchcraft if you're afraid of it, because you could end up in all sorts of problems because you're only going to manifest your fears. And they feel they really need guidance, they really need structure, or they're not going to do it. Again, I would argue that if you know you're not going to do it without someone there, why would you get into it in the first place? It feels to me like passion would be lacking. I mean, some people need the group support, and there's plenty of communities where you can get that without being part of a coven, but if it's something that you absolutely feel that you absolutely need, then it's going to be necessary for you in your path. If you have that very strong urge to, then you should follow your instinct and intuition on that subject. I personally have never felt that way, and I have felt exactly the opposite way, and therefore I follow my intuition and my outlet, and I've had an overwhelmingly positive experience with my path as a solitary practitioner. So I think that's all I can really cover on this ground. I think, again, as I have said before, it's a highly individualized thing, the pagan path, the witchcraft path, however you want to term or coin your path in this way. And I think it's entirely up to the characteristics and the feelings of the individual. If you are strong-willed, you don't like being told how to walk, how to say, how to think, you're probably not going to get on in a coven environment or a group environment even, because you like to do things the way you like to do them, and you have very strong ideas about how you want to practice, and you're not going to get on with someone telling you that you're going to have to do it this way. And the problem with that is you're going to upset someone. Now, that's not to say all covens tell you exactly what to do. I mean, there might be sort of guidelines, there might be suggestions rather than strict things, but for groups to work, somebody has to be in charge, somebody has to organize, somebody has to sort things out. People have to be told what to do, otherwise you're going to get chaos and nothing's going to work. Rituals aren't going to get set up, times are going to be off the chart, people aren't going to know what they're doing, yada yada yada. And whereas if you're on your own, or if you're in a small group of friends, it's probably easier to organize that yourself. I don't know whether or not you could apply the term coven to a small group of friends. I guess you probably could. Maybe that's the way that the best covens kind of work. They just have a sort of intimate circle of friends that they already know they can get on and work out any problems. Maybe that's a good way of doing it. Very possibly. But for me, myself, I have always been completely happy, and I feel I'm progressing at the pace I'm meant to be progressing as a solitary. So is it necessary? Not to me. And I think that's all I can say. Many blessings.